Hi everyone. That makes it worse. I really love that today is about connecting. And when I talk to people about what we do as financial planners, I often explain that we're connecting people's money to what matters to them. And I wanted to start talking about something that happens to me quite often, very clearly from Alistair's question, happens to him very regularly. And I'm very certain that this will resonate with a lot in the room. How often does family members, friends, people at the gym who know what you do, come to you and say, you work in finance, I have a question. And they start telling you their dilemma or situation, and you listen to it, and you realize you've got nowhere to send them. Because the simple fact is that they don't have enough money for advice. Now, I deal with that a lot, and I can't stand the fact that my friends can't afford me. I think it's very easy for us, as an industry, to not face up to the fact that it is not that simple for that many people. And I was very optimistic and hopeful when I heard about the Financial Conduct Authority's simplified advice, until I read it. And I think a lot of the conversation this morning has already been, rightly so, about making choices easier for people. But I think we're ignoring and simplifying something in a sense that isn't right for everyone. Because there's 4 million people in the UK who are self-employed. There's a large amount of people who are being shoved into pensions, auto-enrollment, and they don't actually understand what it is that they're doing. The amount of people that don't engage with the communications that we send out as an industry is enormous. Pension Bee did a freedom of information request and found that 80% of higher rate taxpayers don't reclaim the additional tax relief on their pensions. It's the quickest win for me as an advisor. It's instant to spot that. So I think it comes back to what Nathan was saying earlier, that people don't know what they don't know. But we can't just say that people just need to have portfolios, because that's not going to solve the problem. And I think a lot of people were talking about Vanguard leaving the advice, hybrid advice proposition. And it's very easy to go, well, if Vanguard can't do it, no one else can do it. But if you look at it closely, it really excited me, because it's exactly what we're trying to build, because people have planning needs. And there's an enormous amount of younger people that need help. 30% of Vanguard's clients is under 30. 40% of their new clients is under 30. And no, they're not investing in crypto. I really think that we're not engaging enough with people that really need our help, and we make this a really binary thing. I really think we need to focus on the fact that there's a lot of solutions for investments. There really isn't a lot of solutions to help people figure out what to do. And that's generally what financial planners do. But at the moment, for a large portion of people, the options are robo-advice, guidance, or just do it yourself. It's not personal. It's not giving them that support and reassurance and clarity of what to do. And for the 10% that can afford us, that's where advice comes in at the moment. But the reality is, what we're telling the 90% is it's not for you. How are we going to re-engage those people when they actually fit the current solutions? And actually, suits and ties doesn't work for everyone. I don't see people my own age going through a process where you're sitting down with someone for an hour and a half on something that they class as life admin. And I think that's a really big part of it. We are making this too simple. There's a lot of things in between, and we need a wider range of solutions to help more people. And I think what I really find interesting, and that I don't think we look at enough, is out of those people that are not engaging with their pension statements, Money Alive sort of suggested that they did research on under 35s, And the majority of people spend more time queuing for Costa and Starbucks than they do looking at their pensions. Now, if you think about that fact, how are those people going to remember you as a brand? How are those people going to remember what you do? Because I think if you ask those people, how many of you know who your pension provider is? I think we'd be amazed by the outcome. If we also think about the fact that we are not competing necessarily with each other, we are competing with other services that are seriously focused on client service. They are creating services that people love. You know, has anyone heard about Huel? Has anyone heard about Heights? These are products that people are engaging with on an emotional level. Yet, we work with possibly one of the most emotional things. Money underwrites so much in our lives. And the opportunity that we have to use that to connect our customers with what we do is a massive, massive missed opportunity for us. So I think that we need to focus on the service part of our industry because products don't have the same edge. That's me.
Helena, I think you're our top-rated speaker last year, and you can see why, because that passion for what she does is incredible, isn't it? Absolutely fantastic. And I made loads of notes, but that thing about engaging with people at an emotional level is so important, which is why we're finishing the day talking about storytelling, because it's exactly what we need to do. And if you think about that connection between the human and the machines, focusing on the services, right? That's what differentiates us. Absolutely fantastic. Alistair Walker from Hanford Aitkenhead Walker is our next provocation and has done some fantastic work on client review documents, tying perfectly into what Helena was saying about bombarding people with too much information.
Morning, everyone. Hard act to follow, so I'm going to change the tone completely from Helena and sort of draw a line and see where we go. I didn't get the memo about needing to include connections in the title, so I've called it Planning Reviews for the Future. Bear with me. I do occasionally read my emails. Before we get onto the history, I don't think it would be right to have a session this morning without talking about ChatGPT. It feels like the topic of the day. My favourite story about ChatGPT was a friend of mine who's a financial planner who manages to be even geekier than I am, which I find quite impressive. And he in the space of 10 minutes, he wrote a model portfolio-based, fund instruction given, robo-advice, risk-profiled flow for a potential client, and then got ChatGPT to write it in HTML for him so we could put it on a website. So if you're sitting here thinking we're not under threat in terms of business model, just give that some thought, let it sink in, because I was pretty shocked when he showed me that. Anyway, that's my ChatGPT link. So when I think about connecting, now that I've got the memo, my interest as a financial planner, and we're a small financial planning business, we deal with around 300 client couples, and I think our job is to connect them to what's important, to their outcomes, to their, what I would call their human objectives. So there's this classic thing about, like, we need to know clients' objectives, and it's like, right, then the objective, it needs to be £300 into a pension, or it needs to be, I don't know, open an ISA, open a junior ISA for the kids. Those aren't objectives. They're certainly not human objectives. They are processes, procedures that people go through. So I'm more interested in getting to what their human objectives are. What do they want to achieve? I think someone earlier said that people don't come to these processes with goals, and I would politely disagree, which I'm reasonably good at disagreeing, you might notice, and say that people don't know what their goals are, but they do have them. And part of our job as planners is just to really dig down and get there, but that's not what this is about, so we'll get back on topic. Okay, financial planning reviews. So I looked back at our file server, which goes back about 12 years, and I found this really nice little bit of history. This was 2013. I think I joined the business 2 years ago, and this was mostly what I was doing. We wrote an 8-page financial planning review document. We didn't call it that at the time, because it wasn't a financial planning review. It was mostly a load of prose about investment funds. So the investment fund houses in the room might find that interesting. I reckon we did 1 page of what I'd call intuitive financial planning, which was getting to grips with what the clients wanted, thinking about how we could help them, and then we wrote 7 pages of this kind of stuff about investments. It's what we thought clients wanted. I'm not sure we'd ask them, but we thought we'd give it a go. So hopefully that is history, and hopefully no one else's financial planning reviews or annual reviews look like this today. If they do, come and talk to me afterwards, please, I'm interested. So in about 2015, I had a light bulb moment. This is an old-fashioned light bulb. I meant to do that because there's 2 of these. And I thought maybe this isn't what clients want, and I started hearing about goals and objectives and financial planning, and I went and watched some people speak at conferences, and I thought about how we could help, and I discovered Voyant, which for a massive geek was amazing. It was like this piece of tech I could chuck loads of numbers into and common sense would come out. It was brilliant. It also proved to us that a lot of our assumptions about what was right for clients turned out to be wrong, so that was a bit, gave us a bit of humility. And so our first sort of iteration of financial planning reviews looked like this, and I think that quite a few financial planners that I speak to have review processes that look a bit like this too. We loved charts, and we loved tables, and we wanted to talk about planning, and we wanted to talk about objectives, and did I mention we love charts? Because we really did. The financial planning charts, talk about them in meetings all the time. You'll have seen some of these before, no doubt. Other financial planning software is available. But for all of that passion and input and process that we followed, this kept happening. Suddenly, the financial planning report was at least 15 pages long. I think I actually picked a short one when I took that screenshot. We had a list of important documents, except it was like at least 5 documents long. Which one's important? I'm not sure. I'm genuinely not looking back at that. And the pile of paperwork was basically what we were providing our clients with every year. Once a year, here you go, here's this massive load of paperwork after our nice review meeting. So something needed to change. Light bulb moment number 2, slightly more modern light bulb for the observant people in the room. This really came from something that Brett Davidson said at some talk like this that I watched him talk about. And he said that the highest point of a client financial planner interaction is the moment they leave the room after their annual review. Because it's a little bit like going to see not that we're homeopaths, please don't take this the wrong way, but people like seeing homeopaths, even though mostly they know they don't actually do anything. And the reason that they like it is that someone who presents a bit like a doctor has sat with them for an hour and listened to them. And okay, they get this bit of water that's apparently once seen something that might help them, and then they walk off and they're happy. But it was actually that hour of attention. It was that sitting down, that listening, that asking challenging but constructive questions about what they want to get out of the next year or the next 5 years, the next 10 years. So that's the high point of the relationship. Brett's point here, if you've ever met Brett, he swore a bit more about it than I do. But his point was everything we do afterwards, after that moment, reduces that client relationship. Everything we send, everything we ask them to do, everything we follow up on, it makes that worse. So, what did we have to do? Well, this is the outcome. This is the entirety of our annual financial planning review at this stage. It's not always 5 pages. Usually it's around 5 pages. It has one real human-written digest of our hour's conversation, what we thought was important, what we thought was interesting, and that is written by the planner, by a human being. I mean, maybe ChatGPT could write it, could give it a go. Followed by 4 pages of what we think are the important things that will move the needle for their outcomes, for the things that matter to clients. Because in this sort of back and forth with expanding out our financial planning stuff, we were getting really excited about inputs and processes and how we could help. And then you kind of have this realization that clients don't care about the inputs or the process, because that's kind of what they're paying us to do. It's our job to care about all of that stuff. They just want to know what matters to them. And I think this is closer than it was before. It's definitely not the finished product. Heather, ever politely, did tell me it was a bit ugly. It's just nicer than that, but it is a bit ugly. But what it does, and what it's resulted in, is I've never, before this time, I've never had a client ring me up and spend 15 minutes on the phone telling me how amazing something we sent them was. That happened the other week when I sent this to a client, which was nice. Our test is of whether this is successful, we very often deal with a client couple. Very often, one member of that couple is the person that engages with us, and the other member of the couple tends to dutifully come along every year and sit and have a coffee and have a chat, but never really engages. And so we've set ourselves a test of saying to both people in the room, look, I need to know that you both get out of this what you need. So could you please both feedback? It'd be really useful. And the feedback's been really positive. Universally, we have engaged more with the people that are disengaged, and the people that were previously pretty engaged are happy to. The other thing that really sort of makes me proud of this is the last page, which is just a nice big white space action plan, bottom right. It's just what needs to be done, by who and when. So that's stuff we need to do, it's stuff they need to do, and it's a section for notes. That's the bit that clients like the most. So, what lessons did we learn from it? Well, first of all, feedback's really important. So up until this point, we were mostly just guessing about what clients wanted. This was the result of working with 10 or 15 of a sort of stratified sample of our clients, of our 300, and getting their feedback. I've made this number up, but it sounds good, doesn't it? Less than 5% read more than 50% of the stuff we send out to them. Feels right? Yeah, okay, good made-up stat. I had to keep thinking about that old phrase about writing a shorter letter, if only we'd had the time. We had to put the time into this to make it shorter, to make it more succinct. This was the hardest one for me. You have to be prepared to kill your sacred cows. I really, really like those financial planning reports. I couldn't understand why someone wouldn't want to read a nice Voyant output with like the bars and the colours and the charts. And I went to the 5 clients I thought were most likely to tell me that they wanted to read those, and all of them said, you can drop that bit, we're not interested. We like it in the room, we like it when we're talking, we don't need to read it afterwards. That's your problem, it's your job. So be prepared to kill your sacred cows. And there's always more to do. I don't think in 5 years I'll come and talk to you about this being in a form that it is. At the moment, it mostly goes out via PDF, across a client portal. I'd really like to bring it off the page a little bit. We have to be conscious of need for accessibility and all that sort of thing. The nice thing about this is it posts well as well if we need to. But there's always more to do. And I think in what we do, and I think I'm sort of in a room of kindred spirits here, standing still is going backwards, right? So we've just got to keep thinking, keep challenging, keep moving forward. And those are my lessons learned. Fantastic. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alistair. I thought that tied back with some of the things that Nathan was saying about the objectives. Now, whether they have goals or not, we can discuss that. But about being seen, someone understanding my requirements, and by that highly personalized approach to whittling down to the information they need. And when we did work on consumer duty earlier, or it was last year in October, asking customers about what they read, in the survey, they all said, yeah, I read it. I mean, they even said they read The Kid. Like, it was crazy. Because people will say they read it. But then when my colleague Philip, who's here somewhere, he did in-depth interviews up there with advised customers, he asked them to bring what they read, and they bring the annual review document, they bring the statements from the platform, and that's so important to them. But having that clear action plan is fantastic. So great example of how we can simplify things and make it really meaningful. Right, next up is Adam Smith, who's taught me a lot about the difference between consolidation and aggregation, acquisition. I noticed that Richard Scarrett said he was an acquirer as well. Hang on. Right. There's a lot of companies buying advice businesses. We've got a new little robot at NextWealth. Don't you love him? It's great. He might be my favorite. But there's a lot of companies. The ones in orange are PE backed. So a lot of firms buying advice businesses. Some of them are consolidators. All of them are acquirers. Some of them are aggregators. Adam's going to tell us about a new approach to acquisitions. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm really excited about today when I found out where the venue was, because it's the first time in my 25-year career that I spoke to my mother and she got genuinely excited about what I was doing when I said I was here. And it was the site of the Christmas lectures. And then she killed my mood by saying, but Adam, it's not Christmas. So thanks for the feedback, Mum. But I really want to talk about something, and Heather said to me, what I want you to do is take a fresh approach to acquisitions. And I was like, yeah, thanks for that, Heather, that's great. I'm not sure what to work with. So I thought, given that Faraday has stood here and done wonderful things, you've had Attenborough standing here and doing equally wonderful things. So I wanted to come up with something absolutely mind-blowingly amazing. And I came up with a blank. So instead, what I'm going to talk to you about is jam jars. All right? And specifically, it's been mentioned a couple of times already, actually, about choice. So there was a famous study done in around 2000. Two US business school professors, Lepper and Iyengar from Columbia and Stanford, and they did an experiment with jam jars. And they set up 2 stands on different days, and they varied it for multiple time frames and events. On one day, they had 24 jams. And on the other day, they had 6 jams. And what they wanted to look at is how people responded to that choice. And the 24 jams got more interest. But which one do you think more people ended up buying jam from? The 6, right? So what I want to talk to you today is, because where we are within the acquisition landscape is there are more than 24 options. 31, 35, depending on what day. Every day you get bombarded with someone's bought some. So my job today really is to try and take you down from that 24 jam jar to the 6 jam jars. And I want to do that through following something that most of you will recognise. How many financial planners in the room, financial advisors? Right? This process look familiar? Yeah, you'll have a variation of that, okay? And what I find really amazing is when we talk to firms that join Fairstone or effectively thinking about joining Fairstone, is very few of them have ever taken a financial planning process, so a process of discovery, analysis, designing a plan, implementing a plan and reviewing it, and done it for themselves or their own business. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is just talk you through those stages and try and give you something at each one of those stages to make you think a little bit differently about the acquisition landscape. Because I think what's happening is there's too much of an assumption that it's there for the retiring advisor. It's for someone who's a little bit older, that's at the end of their career, and I genuinely don't think that's the case. I think the acquisition landscape is much more relevant to any financial planner at any point within their careers. But the first bit we've got to do is do some analysis. So I wanted to give you a simple one. I was worried when Heather put up that XY scatter that she'd already nicked this, but it's got different axes, so we're okay. And what I've got here is asset consolidation at the bottom and integration on the top. And you've got 4 boxes. Now, there's a hell of a lot of complexity, and this is a simplification, but it works. Broadly, what you've got when you talk to any potential acquirer, any potential consolidator, is they're going to ask you to do one of 2 things to varying degrees. One would be perhaps move the assets, so consolidate those assets to a platform, an investment proposition, a fund. And the other one is they're going to ask you to integrate and do something different. And when you're looking at it as a planner, as someone that might be thinking about being acquired or looking into the future about being acquired, it's really important to look at those 2 axes and ask yourself a question. Now, there's no right or wrong. In the same way as most financial plans, there's no right or wrong, apart from maybe investing in Credit Suisse a couple of months ago. But there's no right or wrong when it comes to this, and it will depend on the fundamental question that you need to ask yourself. So if you take that bottom left-hand box, this one which is low integration, low asset consolidation, the obvious question is, what's the business model? Because if someone's going to acquire you and they're not going to ask you to integrate, and they're not going to ask you to add it, where's the value add? So particularly if you're then being acquired and you're being paid in stock, what's that going to be worth in the future? How do you give yourself the confidence? If you move across to the right, traditional asset consolidation, no integration at all, we're just going to move the clients. That's great, but just make sure you've asked yourself the question, are the clients being looked after? Can I make sure I reassure them? If I bump into them, am I going to be confident they're getting that good outcome? And then that top right hand, high integration, high asset consolidation, just ask yourself the question, that's a hell of a lot of work, both for the clients and for you as a business, you've got to go a lot through. And then that top left-hand box, high integration, low asset consolidation, and spoiler, that's where Fairstone would sit ourselves, is very much that we're going to ask you to do a lot to integrate. We're not going to ask you to move the assets. We're absolutely fine where they are. We'll work with you over time, but we're not going to ask you to consolidate the assets, but we are going to ask you to integrate. And the biggest challenge that we have with firms joining us, particularly principals that join us, is actually what integration means. Because everyone signs up, and we were talking about the big comedy check that they look at, but there's some pain that you're going to take, because integration is always painful. Never let anyone tell you that's not going to be the case. We're very honest with our firms that there's going to be at least 6 months of pain, and it takes about 2 years to properly integrate a firm. So you've got those questions of each one, but hopefully that's starting to show you that rather than these 31, 35 acquirers, consolidators that look different, you're starting to put them into some options that you can take. And then the second bit is a bar chart. Alistair loves a bar chart. It's not one from Voyant. It's a little bit simpler. But the second thing is just to think about modelling what that income is going to look. It's not just about that primary capital payment. So when you're looking at how much income you're going to make as an acquired firm or an acquired advisor, is don't just think about that primary. Think about the earn-out. One of the things we're really proud of is the fact that all of our firms, without exception, have earned more following the completion of the earn-out than they expected to, so above 100%. So it's not just about that first number, it's about what's going to follow in that secondary, and then particularly if you're a younger advisor or you're a principal of a firm who's actually thinking about the people in that business, what's then going to happen to those people going forward in terms of tertiary income? So how's that going to look? So make yourself a plan, and then the most important thing about a plan is you then review it. Right? So this is something that any financial planning business, any financial advice business can do, is look at that and start modelling their own plan, how that looks and what it's going to do. And then just to try and give you what that plan implementation might look. So this is just an example. This is what we describe within Fairstone as our 5 layers of value. And that's how we would articulate what any acquired firm or potentially acquired firm should think about. So only one of those is that primary capital, that first payment. You've then got of equal importance the earn-out, what's going to happen. Then you've got ongoing remuneration. During that integration phase, during that earn-out, it's really important that you look at what you're going to receive as a principal, as a financial planner, as a firm. And then there's the ability to then share in the profits. You know, advice businesses are profitable. We only buy profitable advice businesses. We don't care about the asset size. It's about the profit flow. That's going to carry on generating a profit. And because we can add the efficiency because of that integration, that profit grows and you should obviously get a share of it. And then the last bit is that we can access capital at a relatively affordable cost. That was a lot easier 12 months ago. But ultimately, we've got that acquisition capital. So we've got one of our firms up in the Northwest who's actually going to go and start up their second business. So 2 younger guys, cracking example, that they sold to us within that phase when they were both in their early 40s, but they want to do more. They've enjoyed it so much, they're going to go again, start a new business, and we've got the ability to provide them that capital. So just from an implementation of a plan perspective, that's just something different to think about, starting again to move us from those 24 jams to the 6 jams. And then the last one is I wanted to give you a number at the end. This isn't a profit multiple, because actually, although we're 9 times multiple that we'd offer, you should think a lot more because you've got those extra layers. But when Iyengar and Lipper completed their study, this is broadly what they concluded. They concluded that actually, if you get the choice architecture right, so if we can articulate this story in terms of an acquiring firm, that we actually are 10 times more likely to get someone to make that decision, to get someone to move and potentially give their clients a future home, give themselves a better outcome, and make sure that there's something there to go forward. I think someone touched on the earlier panel that it's incredibly important that we look about from a stewardship perspective of how we make sure these firms, these outcomes that they're getting are massively long-term. So hopefully that's a different, fresh take. And the jam jars were relevant, but that 10 times thing is what I want you to remember, because I think that's the bit that, whether we're looking at acquiring or we're looking at any sort of choice if it comes up again, it's a really powerful force to look at. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Right, some of you have remembered the Slido code, which is great. It's NWL23 if you forgot. And we've already got a few questions there. So I'm going to go from those because they're coming through really quickly. So the first one, it was actually asked in an earlier session, is about influencers, social media influencers encouraging people to invest in, well, quote unquote, I don't know if we should even call it investing, gambling in crypto. The specific question from Paul Morley is, how can the industry do more to engage impressionable young savers being told by TikTok influencers and fast cars, if you want to be like me, invest in crypto? So is that something we need to be doing? Is that the job for the regulator? Should we be trying to protect younger investors from that? Should we be on TikTok? Alistair?
Yeah. You'd be surprised to hear I've got views on this.
No kidding. Now, you know why I asked him, right?
I do some, I don't know what you'd call it, but some work that's completely online only, completely anonymous. There's no sort of money in it for anyone involved. But we have the ears of about, I think at last count, 1 million generally unserviced young people. We have a Discord server. Some of you will know what that is, with about 4,000 members on it. And these are all people that are being targeted by that kind of thing. And they won't listen to an industry. They won't listen to a regulator. I don't think the industry or the regulator directly can do anything about that, because I don't think that they're going to go, oh, okay, so hang on, Scottish Widows told me not to invest in crypto, so I'll listen to Scottish Widows about that. I just don't think that's a thought process anyone's going to have. I think interventions where people are at is what it's about. So we've got this grassroots, homespun thing that does that. Lots of our job I say job, none of us get paid for it, over the last couple of years was tell people that investing in crypto is stupid, but tell them in terms which they'll understand from peers who kind of get it as well. So yeah, I think the job is probably get out of the way. And if you want to fund some interventions like that, great, but don't do it as industry. Let peers do it. I think that's important.
But is there not also, Patrick Thompson mentioned earlier that his kids have Revolut accounts, and if you go onto a Revolut account, there's a button right there to buy crypto, and there's no friction in that process, but I have to fill out 16 risk profile forms and whatever AML checks and wait 3 days to buy a globally diversified multi-asset fund. So is there not more that we could do on that? Helena?
You need to meet people where they are. And I think that's a very basic thing to say, but it's true, because they don't probably know who Scottish Widows is, but they know who Revolut are. So we have to think about that the way that they use things and the way that we engage with things is massively changing, but we're still stubbornly holding on to showing them charts, sorry, Alistair, and funds, and that's not what matters. They kind of want to know what's the right thing to do, and they want to find answers as to how to do that, but they don't want to go through a process that's going to take ages to do that. I don't think anyone should ever do forms anymore. I mean, nobody likes doing them, nobody likes sending them or submitting them, nobody likes processing them. There's so many quicker ways of doing that, and we've got to think that they engage with services that are super quick and easy. It doesn't mean they won't take time onto decisions that they do need to make. I do think that's true, because I have spoken at a community where crypto and stuff like that is similar to Alistair, is being discussed. But actually the questions I'm being asked is very sensible. So I think if you look at Vanguard's client bank, that's 30% of their clients is 145,000 under 30s, which we're all thinking is buying crypto. I think we're dismissing them too quickly.
Adam, you've got a proposition, don't you, coming to support this market?
So I think just one bit on the influence. I think absolutely as an industry we need to do more to positively influence people. We've just bought a business in the Republic of Ireland, a company called Pax, and one of their main acquisition channels is an Instagram feed. A guy called Paul Merriman does it. It's called Ask Paul. If you're on Instagram, have a quick look. And it's a great way of seeing that in the Irish market that he can access young people and get them engaged in financial planning. If anyone's worked in the Irish market, it's not quite financial planning as we'd recognising it, but it's a much better outcome than clicking on a button to buy some crypto. But I think there are ways that we can do it, and it's about getting different people to do it rather than people that have been in the industry 30, 40 years. It's people that are going to be disruptive. They're going to look at it, and I think that's something we absolutely can do. But to answer the question of what people need, they need advice, right? And advice is expensive, but it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be expensive, and we can use automation, we can use robots, but ultimately a person has to deliver it, because what people want is they want the vindication and they want the confirmation that what they're going to do is right. And a bit that I've talked about before, the new proposition that we launched called Mineral, we soft launched for protection last year, which is the much harder bit of getting someone to do it. 90% of our clients are currently taking out income protection. What a fundamentally brilliant outcome, because the first time that their wealth gets called into question when they can't work, they're going to get a payment from an insurer to make sure that they're not having to go into their cash savings, they're not having to take loans. And I think, we talk about wealth a lot, but firstly, we've got to get people onto that wealth journey. That starts with protection.
So to follow on that starts with protection, there's a question about Nathan Long's stats that he shared, showing that even the wealthiest in society have under provision. What is that here? Are under provided for. Anyway, they're not buying life cover. Enough of it. And so the question is: are advisors complying with the consumer duty? Are they talking to their customers about protection or focusing too much on investments? Any views?
It's difficult because people will go to what they're most comfortable with. I think there's enormous amount of complexity in protection policies to an extent. And I think sometimes because advisors don't deal with the right demographic, they probably don't speak about it enough. It's my just simplistic observation of that. Average advised client is over 50. You know, trying to get someone income protection when they're over 55, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, if someone's relatively wealthy, if they haven't got a liability, that they own their own home, that they haven't got dependents, they don't really need life insurance. They might need other things, but they don't necessarily need life insurance. It was probably more the middle quintiles that I was more interested in, because those are the people that absolutely do need it, and probably over and above some sort of wealth.
Yep. Okay. Somebody's taken issue possibly with my comment that investing in crypto is gambling. If you look at when people buy crypto and how many drinks they've had before it, there does seem to be a correlation with some of the sports betting, but not entirely. I take your point, and I do own crypto. I wouldn't necessarily say it's an investment, more of a punt in my case, but that's me individually. But the question is, or the provocation is, investing in Bitcoin is not gambling on crypto, and that's a very condescending attitude. And that very condescending attitude is what's holding us back for engaging with the next generation. Discuss. Is my very condescending attitude holding us back from engaging with younger people?
It's interesting because we talked about risk earlier, and I listened to that, and I really think that sometimes we shoot down opportunities because we talk about risk too negatively. It's about education and telling people, help them make an informed decision around what they do, because ultimately people will still have a choice, and they have a choice as to where they invest. The same way people can choose to buy property, and you would argue that property is not a very good investment, you know, generally speaking. So you can argue that about any asset class individually. What we need to do is help people actually understand what they're doing, and I think that's the biggest challenge with things like crypto, because the large amount of people that invest in it haven't got a clue what they're doing. And I think that's where it becomes challenging. And it's more about helping people understand uncertainty, understand investment composure. That, to me, is far more important than trying to say to people, don't take the opportunity to invest.
Which comes back to your question earlier, Alistair. If you start the questionnaire with what's your capacity for loss, you're immediately starting with that negative, right? I remember doing research a number of years ago with people who had high cash balances, asking them why they didn't invest. And there was a woman I spoke to who said she thought capital at risk meant their house could be taken away. And she said until she had £1 million in the bank, she couldn't gamble at all. She couldn't risk losing it. And it wasn't that she could lose what she invested. It was that could somehow, you know, she could lose her savings that she hadn't invested. So that understanding of risk, I think there's a lot of work potentially that needs to be done there. We have time for one last question. So I'm going to take the one that's voted up the highest. How can providers help advisors, so platforms, asset managers, tech, etc., engage with their clients? So with a mixed audience of people from, you know, across the wealth management industry, what more do you need from asset managers, platforms, tech companies? We'll just go one by one to wrap up. Adam?
So just get data right and get it accurate. And it's not a lot more complex than that. If you get the data to us in an easy to consume form in the right way, whether that's about the target market, whether it's about the products, whether it's evaluation, we can then do the service, no problems.
Alistair?
Yeah, I'm going to expand on that one as well. Data, yeah, but please get together, all of you who are in the data sector, and work out some norms for data. Get a working group together, work out what the 100 different items of data that we all need, we all use, look like, get them consistent, and allow us to take that data from one place to the other. Don't think you own the data, the clients own the data. We can help facilitate that. I've got a friend who runs a small financial planning business with 5 IT people who just built a data warehouse to do that for their business. And it's taken that for them to be able to say, here's some client data, send it out to the various places. It shouldn't take that. We can solve it between us, I think.
Helena?
Do what Alistair did and take that millions of bits of paper and make it 3 or 4.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot easier.
Fantastic. Great. You've got your marching orders. And Billy Burnside from Criterion, wherever you are, you need to talk to Alistair. He's got some ideas for you. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Excellent panel.